Users of Reddit, what's the worst financial decision you've seen someone make? A dude who owned a small convenience store in our town spent like $20,000 on fidget spinners. He was posting for like a year begging people to buy them as he would lose his business and his marriage was falling apart due to it. Why in the world would he need that many fidget spinners? They were exceptionally popular and I suppose he thought he could make a mint during the fad. I guess he got a break buying in bulk, but geesh, dude. Perhaps he was bullshitting on what he spent, I don't know. I just recall that daily posts showing loads of boxes with him begging for help on Facebook. I presume it didn't go well as his little store closed years ago and he is divorced. Ran up credit card debt requiring bankruptcy. Once they were able to build credit again, 7 years later, they proceeded to run up a massive amount of debt again, but couldn't go bankrupt again, so they used debt consolidation. The debt didn't come from sudden expenses. They just needed to buy things to feel better. You have to respect someone's dedication to bad choices to wait 7 years and run it right back. My former sister-in-law had a thriving medical practice. She got so stressed that she joined the Scientologist and started taking their classes. She opened up 5-6 credit cards without telling my brother, maxed the cards out with hundreds of thousands in cash withdrawals, and gave it to that cult. Yeah, but did she rid herself of her harmful body thetans? The last thing I want to do is engage her in conversation on the subject. First, the entire notion drives me crazy. Second, I don't have a good poker face. Was this recent? How did it end? Well, this occurred about 5 to 6 years ago. My brother made some noise, but did nothing about it but get some assurances from her that she wouldn't do it again. But she kept going to Clearwater to take the stupid classes, marooning him at home for months at a time while her practice kept going downhill. They finally divorced a couple of years ago. Shake my head. A guy in my fraternity got $30,000 for an undisclosed reason, I'm guessing a family death or something, and he bet it all on the Yankees winning one game. They lost. A guy who lived on my floor in the dorms inherited $100,000 from his grandfather's estate. He was suddenly very popular, buying all the beer, pizza, new car, golf clubs, etc. He was living large. His parents showed up about a month later to attempt to help straighten him out and recover funds. The golf clubs and other items went to a pawn shop and they even enlisted the resident advisor to help watch out for the guy. Terrible for an 18 or 19-year-old to come into that kind of money out of nowhere with no reference, or respect, for how to handle it or how it was earned. My awful aunt was the trustee for my grandparents' estate. When they passed, she decided to sell their house to a random realtor who put a leaflet on the door. To the realtor, not with the realtor. It wasn't put on the market, and the aunt rejected a matching offer by me after I argued hard to actually list the house and have people bid on it. The realtor slapped a new coat of paint on it and sold it a couple of months later for literally $1 million more than she bought it for. I am not a lawyer, but she breached her fiduciary duty and you could have taken her to court for it. Yeah, I should have, but there was a lot going on at the time. I had newborn twins with 2 pre-existing kids already at home, and I was grieving the loss of my grandfather who was one of my best friends my entire life. There were also more beneficiaries involved, so the personal loss to myself wasn't the full $1 million. Not that it wouldn't still be worth it, but with everything going on at the time I just didn't have it in me. And as you can probably imagine, my aunt would have dragged it out and fought tooth and nail to the bitter end. It was probably worth it for me to be able to cut that branch of the family off and walk away, rather than have to deal with them in such a manner for God knows how long. Edit, my friends, the pre-existing descriptor was clearly meant as a joke. A friend of mine who is very bad with money and his girlfriend bought some sort of water filtration system from a door-to-door salesman. He has to pay something like $300 per month for this filtration system. He was all stoked because it came with a free set of pots and pans. Fast forward a year and his girlfriend has broken up with him, moved out of the house, and he's had to sell his home because he can't afford to live there. The water filtration system is now sitting in a storage unit where he still pays $300 per month for it because he's on a 2 or 3 year contract. Sorry, the details are fuzzy. We have great water quality in my area. I work for a government agency in building maintenance. We get hit up by water filter and air filter clowns every couple months wanting to sell us some bullshit. We are obligated to sit through their sales pitch so we aren't biased, but we all know it's bullshit snake oil. The homes and buildings that do need specialized systems like these usually have them installed on day one. My supervisor took out a loan against their 401k to pay their rent because their credit cards were maxed. 2 weeks later, they bought a brand new $60,000 Lincoln with basically nothing down because her daughter just had a baby and I need a bigger car for that. I bet he or she said I with a straight face too. 100%. I sat down with a guy to help him figure things out. He had a fair amount of credit card debt but nothing impossible. Just by consolidating it on a new card with 0% interest for even a year it'd have seen amazing progress. Seemed like he had taken my advice. Next I saw him, it turned out he paid it off using his 401k. Worked with a 50-year-old guy who looked like the arse end of a rhino and hated anyone not from England, who sent £10,000 to his fiancée in Thailand he'd never met for a boob job, clothes and flight over. Oddly enough, her naked pics and promises of anal when she visited stopped once the money had been sent. We had to talk to one of our employees a couple of weeks ago about something like this. He's not the best looking or most intelligent guy, but he's a nice guy. Apparently, he met a girl online who lives in Atlanta. We saw her Facebook page and you could tell something was fishy. She was this smoking hot blonde with only like 4 pictures, all in skimpy tops and lingerie. No other posts on her page, just pictures. She told him she was single and had no family, they had all passed away. He decided a week after meeting her that he was going to quit his job and move to Atlanta to live with her and help her rent an apartment. Us fellow employees and his family kept telling him it was a scam or catfish and not to go through with it. He got pissed and apparently had suicidal thoughts and checked himself into a mental hospital for a couple of days, but eventually he agreed and didn't go through with it. Old relative, husband died so she was left with a giant house, and millions in pension and investments, trusted the church and church member who worked as a financial advisor. Gave it all away to the church and the advisor screwed them over bad. Kids were livid that she lost all their dad's work for 50 years. Really nice woman, but don't trust anyone with large sums of money, especially church people. Apply for a $5,000 loan, didn't accept quick enough so applied for another $5,000 loan, both got accepted and ended up gambling it all. Okay, but did they win? Is the real question. Nothing, 10,000 debt now lol. Oh, but you are forgetting the interest, so it's what, at least 14,000? A guy I dated for a short time had been joining an MLM scheme selling insurances. I listened to his monologue and told him I had no money. He was furious and tried to sell insurance to our waiter at the restaurant. He failed again. I'm still laughing today, he was no good guy. My dad retired early from a 20-plus year career where he was making over $150,000 per year so he could join an MLM. He ended up draining his entire retirement fund, over $500,000, filed for bankruptcy, and foreclosed on my childhood home in just over 3 years. And he still tries to give me financial advice. My cousin spent 100% of her inheritance and took out a lien on her home to buy a second home in the mountains. Thing is, it was being pushed over by a mountain. And they thought they could fix it. I went and seen it and every door jamb was crooked and the doors wouldn't shut. They took me down into the basement and they were trying to use I-beams to stop the mountain from pushing on the home. I was just like, what the hell are you doing? That won't solve anything. Fast forward 6 months and they asked me for $50,000 to help and I declined. Fast forward a year and the home collapsed and now they owe over $300,000 for a home that doesn't exist, and if they don't make the payments they lose their other house too because they used the original home as collateral and could not get insurance on the second home. Total money lost, upwards of $700,000. Cashed in their 401k to have a cocaine party. How was it? Basically, everyone just came over and stole his cocaine, and many of his belongings. He then had to move back home with his mom shortly thereafter, so probably not great for him. Put everything in his girlfriend's name to hide assets as he owed the IRS, then girlfriend sold his business, cashed out his accounts and ran. My partner's father did this, sold his business to an employee for $1 to hide it during his divorce. And was shocked when suddenly, the guy didn't magically give it back. He lost his entire business and inventory for $1. He was an abusive asshole, so couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Our family structure was that my great-grandparents, super rich, had my grandparents, who then they adopted my mom and uncle, then my grandparents also raised me. Great-grandparents die and leave money to mom, uncle, and me, in the form of a trust that my grandparents could pull from, with the idea being that they could get supplementary money in the form of interest. Fuckers got sucked into Rick Joyner's church and went from a close to $1 million house to downsizing, plus tons of money into who knows whose bank accounts, to now just discover the trust my grandparents left is almost emptied out and tens of thousands in credit card debt. We get nothing. They are selfish assholes and jumped aboard all sorts of grifts. They sent me their financials and spend a significant amount of their income on supplements and shit, and expensive organic groceries. So we get nothing. Uncle basically lives in a trailer, mom is literally in a homeless shelter. I somehow did well. Nobody will see anything. I cut them off from my life. They are awful people and may very well die completely broke. A coworker I used to have worked every second of overtime he could for several years to save up for a house. When he applied for the house loan, he based his mortgage payment on all of the overtime he had been working. I tried to tell him that wasn't a good idea, but he didn't want to hear it. He ended up divorced a few years later because his wife got tired of him always working. When my wife and I bought our house, we based it off of just my income, so if she lost her job or I lost mine, we would be fine. Everyone told us we should get a super nice house with our income since we could afford it. 2 years later, my wife lost her job and now we have nothing to worry about. No added stress. It was the best decision we have made. My brother and his wife were in massive debt, didn't work high-paying jobs and could no longer afford their 2-bedroom apartment while trying to pay off the debt. They moved back home, into our parents' basement. A week before they moved in, they built a computer, and a year after that, they consciously decided to try to get pregnant, which they did, while still living in the basement and knowing they haven't improved their financial state whatsoever. Your poor parents. Now they won't be able to kick them about because of the kid. Oh, don't worry. My parents had a brilliant idea to sell their house and move into my sister's house. They paid off all their debt, their car, plus all the expenses of getting them new furniture / first and last month's rent. Pretty sure they are back in some sort of debt now, and from what I was told, my sister-in-law never even said, "Thank you." Had a co-worker with 5 kids who could all go to USC for free once he has worked there for 15 years, even if he quit. He quit at 14.5 years for a job that barely paid more than he made at USC. Cost all 5 kids a free education at a top school since he couldn't wait 6 more months. Generational bag fumble. Is that all there is to the story? My ex's stepdad left Boeing right before he would have earned a considerable pension, but it turns out he didn't leave. He was fired for carrying on an 11-year-long affair with another coworker who worked in a different part of the country on the company's dime and communicating using company email. He put in his 2 weeks and we had a going away party. A bunch of us took him to lunch and tried to talk him out of it. What was the new job that he desperately wanted? Can't help but feel there's a lot more to this story. Your guess is as good as mine. This has been over a decade, so I don't actually remember. It was much closer to his house though. He had a long commute, but it was by train, so would seem worth another 6 months for 5 kids to go to USC. He was likely fired. They could have seen that it was coming up to 15 years and found something to fire him for. Purchase NFTs. My aunt dropped $1,000 on those Trump NFTs. Then tried to borrow money from me. Some people are just dumb, that's the only explanation I have. My maternal grandmother bought an 8-plex to avoid capital gains when she sold her large house. The apartment complex was in the red and needed a lot of repairs. She hired my father to do them and be on-site manager. The place started making money. My mom, divorced from my dad, was mad that my grandma bought it in the first place, then hired my dad, then was proved wrong because it was making money. My grandma was in her 90s and my mom pressured her for years, so my grandma finally sold it. That place is in a high market area and is now worth millions. My mom made a poor financial decision based on petty spite. She probably would have lost the inheritance in some other way anyways. You're absolutely right. She sold 2 properties worth almost $1 million and it has completely disappeared. Who knows what she did with it? Extravagant weddings that end in divorce a year later. Supposedly, there was a study that looked at the amount spent on weddings and the length of the marriage. The more spent on the wedding, the shorter the marriage. I've never actually seen the study, so it may just be one of those internet fallacies. Saw this play out several times. Cousin paid $45,000, lasted about a year. Another cousin, roughly around $45,000 as well, almost 2 years. Random acquaintance took out several loans for about $100,000, had her princess day. They split about 6 or 7 months later. Friend of mine, 30,000, 30 days. Found out he was cheating with the maid of honor before and after the wedding. Knew someone who answered those scam emails thinking they would get rich. Last I heard, he lost around $50,000. Emptied out savings account and maxed out credit cards. Left in debt and had to move back with ailing parents. Not a close to them at all, but more like a friend of a friend of a friend's cousin. Motherfucker just would not listen. Genuinely thought he was going to be a millionaire. They kept stringing him along until the bitter end, and then, poof. Biggest concern his friends had was him trying to milk his ailing parents for their last nickel and dime. Fortunately, he wised up and knew he'd been had. The last I heard of him was he had an hourly job somewhere and trying to get out of debt. This is why everyone should have played RuneScape in 2007. Get scammed for your virtual currency, folks, and learn your lesson. My brother's ex fell for a Craigslist scam. She found a motorcycle and the guy needed money up front to pay bills, before she even saw it. We told her don't do it, it's a scam. She said she already sent $1,000. Of course, he was never available to show her the bike, and we found out from my brother after they broke up she actually continued sending him money in hopes of getting the motorcycle. I think she was out $3,000 by the end. My ex-husband got cheated out of tens of thousands of dollars just by being an overtrusting and underthinking seller. He had always wanted a piano his entire life, and one day a friend's father had passed and left them an incredibly amazing and very old piano that she had no use for, so they gifted it to him. He loved that thing so much, tuned it and fixed it up. Then a giant ball of tragedy struck that put us in very bad financial situation, causing us to no longer afford where we were currently living and having to move to his family's old home, which is off the mainland and on an island. Being that the only way to get anything moved was by ship and extremely expensive, he had to sell a lot of things. And much to his dismay, the piano was just too big and too heavy to afford to ship there. So he put out a listing to sell it for a very reasonable price. It was an antique, in spectacular condition, made in the early 1900s and was worth at the very least $80,000. He listed it for a fraction of what it was worth due to time constraint on having to get rid of it before the move. Someone contacted him and offered to buy it. And here is where he did something monumentally stupid. The buyer offered to have a truck come and pick up the piano in a very quick time frame and asked if it would be alright to give my husband $1,000 up front and then the rest in 2 weeks when they got paid. I know he was under a lot of stress, but damn, that was dumb. You do not let anyone walk away with an incredibly valuable item without it being paid in full. As I'm sure no one here is shocked by, the person never paid anything else on the piano and just disappeared. The money from that sale alone was pretty much all we were going to have to live off of until he was able to secure a new job in the new location. Scammers are truly awful and many people need to learn not to be so trusting. It's sad, but it's just how it is.